We're in the fourth quarter. We
That's
haven't hit
right,
the
yeah.
2-minute warning, but
Sorry. Good morning. Welcome to the November 17th, 2022 Urban Renewal Agency meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and Commissioner roll call. Director Johnson.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Coles,
here,
Davis,
Here.
Crosby,
Here?
Fleshman,
Here.
Jeltness,
Here.
Clemenson,
Here.
and Chairman Baltzell has an excused absence.
Great. If you'd please join us in the pledge, we'll have Commissioner Crosby lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. Do we have any ceremonies, appointments, or announcements today?
No, we do not.
Great. How about conflict disclosures with commissioners?
nope.
Nope.
No? Great. How about item number 4, consent calendar?
Vice Chair Davis, Commissioners. Item A in the consent calendar is the commission meeting minutes of October 20th, 2022. Item B is the payables for this month, totaling $9,085.19. Item C is the bank activity report, which shows total funds in all accounts of $4,196,577.69 and accrued interest for the month of $6,745.36. Item D is the financial reports as of October 31st, 2022. Approval of the consent calendar will authorize a transfer of $9,085.19 to the First Interstate checking account for the monthly payables and $6,745.36 accrued interest to the general fund. Vice Chair Davis, I would answer any questions.
Do we have any questions from the commission? Comments? Hearing
No.
none, we'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote?
Crosby,
Aye.
Fleshman,
Aye.
Jeltness,
Aye.
Coles,
Aye.
Clemenson,
Aye.
Davis.
Aye. Next up, we have committee updates, finance and policy. Commissioner Crosby?
The Finance Committee had a meeting on the 14th, and we reviewed the actual versus projected budget and found that we are under budget by about $28,000. The budget period for 2022 ended on September 30th. Or was it October 30th?
September 30th.
September, that's what I thought. We also reviewed each of the financial status of each of the districts, our obligations, our fund balance. We have, I think, as mentioned several times, we've closed 6 districts. We have 2 more that we're closing next month, East Post Falls and Center Pointe. And we are speculatively projecting that with the closing of East Post Falls, we'll be able to disperse about $1.5 million to the various underlying tax districts in tax increment that we've collected in excess of our obligations. So it's been a very successful district. We also reviewed the task orders, which are on today's agenda, and one of the members had reviewed all of the financials, which we just approved. So that's a report for what we did.
All right, do we have any questions regarding the committee update? No? District review, Commissioner
I
Coles?
don't have anything this morning.
All right, next up is communications, property, and personnel. Joe, do we have any updates with the website project?
It's still ongoing. The contractor is in process of updating the content of the new website.
Excellent, great, thank you so much. All right, item 6 on the agenda is the citizen comments. This section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the commission regarding an agency-related issue. Comments related to future public hearings should be held for that public hearing. Persons wishing to speak will have 5 minutes. Do we have anyone that's not on the agenda wishing to speak? No? Great. Item 7 is presentation. We have Dena Naccarato, the Superintendent of Schools, for Post Falls School District 273, here to present.
Thank you for having me. Hopefully I can operate this clicker effectively.
Just right beyond, but it's already started.
Oh,
Yay!
Press F5, it will start.
Okay, before I start with this, thank you for having me. Really, my goal today is to actually solicit some feedback from all of you with regard to how to mobilize our citizenry to actually get out and vote in support of our public schools. I think this group is aware that we have a pretty formidable faction who is against public education in our area, and so my goal in speaking with just about anybody who will listen to me is to try to really educate people with regard to Idaho public school funding, and then solicit feedback on how to make the presentation better, more understandable. Do I need to get more into the weeds or less into the weeds? So any feedback you have for me today would be greatly appreciated. So this is a very brief overview of Idaho public school funding, and in particular it deals with the Post Falls School District, and the hope is to highlight our fiscal responsibility and how we compare with other districts. Those kinds of things are not on the slides, but those are things that I'm going to share with you today. So as I said, any feedback that you have for me is greatly appreciated, and I just want to thank you for your time this morning. So we'll go ahead and get started with our little overview. So first and foremost, this very first slide kind of shows Idaho school districts as a whole and where our funding comes from. So the largest portion of funding for public schools in Idaho comes from the state. I think all of you have heard the state spending $2 billion, and there's some pretty big numbers floating around out there with regard to what is being funded by the state. I'd just like to remind everyone that yes, $2 billion seems like a lot of money until you consider it spread out between 178 school districts and charters. So the yellow represents the state, the green represents the feds, and when you think about the federal government, that would include any federal programs, so special education programs, which are woefully underfunded, by the way, by the federal government, title programs, and our child nutrition program, if you're kind of looking at the big three with regard to the federal government. Property taxes represents both the blue, the orange, and the red statewide. And so when you take all those together, you can see that for the vast majority of districts in our state, most of them are relying on property taxes from levies, bonds, etc., to fund schools. So that leads us to Post Falls. You can see here our pie chart is a little bit different in that we definitely rely on the state for the vast majority of our funding. About 22% comes from the feds, and our property taxes, and the little red line represents tort, which is a line item on your property taxes. It's not very much money. It's about $3.42, but you can see that comparatively speaking, the Post Falls School District truly has a history of asking for only what it needs from our taxpayers, and I think this slide illustrates that when you consider that 13% of our overall funding is what's coming from our local taxpayer. So, state funding, and what I will say about state funding is there are some misnomers in the verbiage that our state chooses to use when it talks about public school funding. So salaries and benefits come from the salary-based apportionment, which is basically the number of students you have in a variety of different grade levels go into a conversion that then tells you how many teachers you qualify for and how many support staff you qualify for. I didn't include all of the divisors and the multipliers for that in this presentation, but that's certainly something I can share if you feel like it would help the public better understand how money comes to us. For school districts, the vast majority of us are spending 85 to 88% of staff salary, and 85% of our budget goes out to those people that we employ. who work for and with our students each and every day. Discretionary funding is not really discretionary unless you consider heat, electricity, water, healthcare. Those things are funded out of discretionary funding. And then the transportation services are funded by the state. What I think most people don't know is that we are reimbursed for transportation between 80 and 85%. So the school district, and in essence then the taxpayer, has to pick up anywhere between 15 and 20% that the state doesn't cover for us to transport children to and from school. So how did we get here? In 2006, the state legislature changed the way schools were funded to provide a property tax relief for the citizens of Idaho, and a 1-cent sales tax was added. If everybody remembers, then the recession hit, and we knew that this change in funding was going to affect public education in a negative way, and so the legislative body passed a law that basically allowed school districts to supplement the state appropriation, thus a supplemental levy, which you'll hear me refer to as a fundamental levy, because there's nothing supplemental about this. So really, let's talk a little bit about where our gaps are. State salary funding right now per teacher comes to the Post Falls School District. So this is just Post Falls. Every school district is a little bit different depending on how many teachers are experienced, what your salary schedule looks like, those kinds of things. Post Falls does not follow the career ladder, which is Idaho's funding mechanism to the salary-based apportionment to bring money into schools. We have to pay well over that, and in an effort to compete with our local school districts, and of course, I won't even talk about Washington because it's impossible for us to compete with Washington. So you can see that we've got about a $6,000 gap, $5,200 gap, $5,200 gap between what the state funds per teacher and what the school district actually pays out per teacher. We're going to talk a little bit more about this gap when we talk about our support staff, which are also known as classified staff. These are people who do not have to have a certificate in order to work for us. So right now the state funds classified employees, all the folks that you see on these slides, at $24,841 a year. So to put this in perspective, in 2020, the school district's beginning wage for a paraprofessional, those support staff that are working with our teachers and with our children, was $10.68 an hour. So since then, obviously, we've been trying to compete with McDonald's, Jack in the Box, Kentucky Fried Chicken, you name it, Amazon. And so the district has found itself in the position of raising our support staff salaries, especially our lowest, those lowest funded folks, by over 30% in the last 3 years. So now our lowest wage is $13.81 an hour, which is still not competing with the fast food market, Amazon, those kinds of things. The other thing for you to know is when I was talking about kind of how children drive the units that drive the teachers, they also drive the number of support staff a district is able to hire. So in 2022, fiscal 2022, now we're in 2023, we qualified for 117 support staff. We have 330. So how do we do that? Well, we aren't able to hire these people full time. And so we kind of split the FTE as many ways as we can to spread out these support staff so that we have the coverage that we need for our students. And I've heard people say, well, you know, when I was in school, we just had a teacher and a principal. I think we can all agree, whether you were in school 50 years ago, 40 years ago, or 30 years ago, public education and what our communities rely on public education for has changed. And therefore, our staffing needs have also changed. So when we talk about our fundamental levy, we need to talk about other areas that the state does not fund. So we currently have 6 nurses in the Post Falls School District. All of those are paid for by fundamental levy dollars. All of our K-Tech program is funded by fundamental levy dollars. Our extracurricular activities, all funded by levy dollars. Any professional development that we have for our teaching staff, funded by levy dollars. Curriculum and technology, also funded by levy dollars. Now, curriculum and technology are line items in the state budget. However, example, the Post Falls School District on any given year would receive anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 for curriculum. When we go to purchase a curriculum, it's anywhere between $500,000 and $1 million. So the idea that the state is funding curricular expenses is simply not true. Now, the good news about curriculum is once you buy it, you have it for 6 years. But curriculum is kind of like your iPhone. After 6 years, you have to re-up your license, or in most cases, most of us are just gonna buy a new phone. And so those expenditures are ongoing for school districts, regardless if we're talking about Post Falls or if we're talking about Coeur d'Alene, Lakeland, anywhere. So we are able to get extra money from our taxpayers through our fundamental levy, which means that every 2 years I feel like the district is out begging for money, because districts who have over 25% of their budget in a fundamental levy are able to ask voters to approve the levy in perpetuity. But if you have been fiscally conservative, like we have, you have to ask for money every 2 years. And so our levy is going to expire at the end of fiscal year 23. We need a 50% plus one, we need just a simple majority to pass it. And this money is fundamental for the programs that we run in the Post Falls School District. I believe the next slide is going to talk a little bit about bonds, and I'm going to skip over that because I don't want to muddy the waters, and I've actually taken it out. I didn't realize that it was going to be converted into a PowerPoint, so I'm going to skip over that and talk about property taxes really quickly. Because the other thing that I think people don't understand about public schools is we are not like other taxing agencies, whereby if you're funded on a levy percentage, like your levy rate, if your assessed value goes up, your taxes go up. Post Falls School District, I won't say all school districts because it's different in certain parts of the state. For example, Boise doesn't even have to run a levy because they were a school district before statehood, and so they just say this is what we need, and they get it. So it's not the same everywhere, which is kind of interesting since we're supposed to have a uniform and equitable education system in our state. However, I think people think when their assessed values increase, then their school district taxes are going to increase. And that's not true. What happens is when we run a fundamental levy, we ask for a set dollar amount, and that set dollar amount is all we're going to receive. So in 2021, we asked for $4.95 million per year for 2 years. You can see last year our tax rate was $1.39. This year our tax rate is 85 cents. And so what does that, what does that mean for taxes? And I'm gonna get there in a minute, but I wanna go back. So I'll just show you and then I'll go back. This is a homeowner in Post Falls, and there's school district taxes only. So you've got 3 line items for your taxes for the Post Falls School District. You've got a bond, you've got our fundamental levy, and you've got our tort. So in this person's case, their assessed value, you can see, has gone up exponentially, including this last 2022 assessment, and their school district taxes have actually decreased. So now I'm gonna go back. In our election on March 14th, we are asking our voters to approve basically a replacement levy with an increase. So the new ask is for $5,958,551. The reason that we need to increase our fundamental levy is kind of twofold. One, the district has some pretty significant security needs that we need to address. Some of our more senior buildings do not have secure vestibules, so we need to build them, and then we need to change our access system district-wide. Right now we have controlled access whereby you buzz in and a secretary will ask for your ID and then they let you into the building. We need to move to an access control system whereby our buildings are locked down at a certain time. Automatically the doors are locked. every exterior door has a sensor on it so that staff know if a door has been propped open somewhere and we can go close it. We have security camera needs in the district. I think all of us understand how technology works in that it seems like it's built so you have to buy new stuff from time to time. Some of our cameras are at the end of life or past their end of life and are 15 plus years old. The technology in security cameras has changed dramatically with the quality of the picture and everything in 2022 versus 2008 or prior. So those are some of the kind of new costs that the district needs to address. We also are hoping to hire additional school resource officers. We've also hired security deans for our elementary schools, and those costs for those extra eyes on kids are ongoing costs. Further, we have increased wages, as I mentioned before, for our support staff, and those wage increases are ongoing. What can I change? What questions do you have? What feedback do you have? Please talk to me.
I've been on the school board for 10 years, first as treasurer and now as chairman, and I understand trying to explain the school board budget. I don't think I've understood it in 10 years. The budget you have to put together is so convoluted. It doesn't matter how much math you know. It doesn't help. So I certainly understand your problem. I think for the new levy, you really need to stress the security aspects. I think that will resonate with parents and the community will understand it, particularly when we continue to see school shootings and we continue to see what happened at the University of Idaho. Also, letters to the editor. I think marshaling your PTOs and your parents to write in with letters to the editor would be helpful. This kind of presentation, I think, is very useful. I also, the public does not understand the cost of special ed. I do. I mean, we literally have kids where we have to hire a full-time person to be with them every single moment they're in school. And I don't know how you convey that, because unless they have a special needs kid, it's impossible for them to understand the magnitude of the, I have a daughter-in-law who's a special ed teacher, and the importance of paraprofessionals to what she can do, particularly with reading on the kids, is amazing. And paying them $15 an hour, as you say, does not compete with fast food or working in a grocery store, or any of the other options that they have. And then I also think the public needs to understand the difference between where we live and the proximity to Washington. A teacher can drive 20 minutes and earn $30,000 more a year. And so just keeping your staff is a tremendous, I think, first of all, you're doing a fantastic job, as is your staff. But I think those are some of the aspects that you really need to hit with and this kind of presentation to organizations. Even those who oppose what you're doing will resonate, I think. I've gone to organizations that oppose some of the things that I support, and if you explain it and answer the questions, even the crazy questions, and I know you'll get them, then I think you make some headway.
Do you think, for example, special ed is simplified, is we receive 20% of the funding from the federal government. The other 80% has to come from us.
Right.
It comes out of discretionary or it comes out of fundamental levy.
Sure.
Do you think a slide that kind of just illustrates that it would be important, or should I just verbalize that?
I think that's important. I think you also need to enumerate what special ed. I mean, people hear that number, but hear that name, but they don't understand it. I mean, you can go from kids who are completely autistic to and there's no choice. You have to take special ed kids. You have to mainstream them to the extent that you can, and that's a tremendous burden. So I understand that. I don't know that most parents do, particularly if they don't have a special kid or don't know a special kid. But, yeah, I think some
Okay.
additional information about that would be very useful.
Perfect, thank you.
And
I
some
think if-
discussion about unfunded mandates, because that brings up the point, if only 20% of the money for special education is provided, but yet you have to take these kids,
Yes,
then that's something I think the taxpayers can understand. I don't know if you capture any new voters by going into the details of all the funding. I
Okay.
just think there's a dissatisfaction, not with public education, but with the way our dollars are forced to be spent in these different areas. And everybody has a better idea. The problem is trying to get them to focus in one direction. So I'm not sure going through all the ways things are funded is helpful for a lot of voters.
okay.
They're frustrated. They're frustrated with the state of everything in general.
I kind of disagree with you, Colin, believe it or not. I think it's good to have visuals on it and kind of break it down into big animal pictures because people don't know what they don't know. So to me, I look at that pie chart and I'm just like, wow, okay, you have, these necessary services and educational opportunities and they're not being funded. So where's that money going to come from? I mean, it's just, you just got to break it down. And I think most reasonable people will understand that.
I agree with that. I just, there are
Yeah,
some of
I
it that's
think,
too
I
much.
think also you've got people that remember that when I was in school, there was a principal and a superintendent. And now you're dealing with state, local, federal regulations. They don't understand how regulated and how prescribed what you do is for all, and the unfunded mandates and the things you have to do that they didn't have to do when they went to school 30 years ago or 40 years ago. And I think, reminding them of that and the fact that, there are every single dollar you get comes with responsibilities. It's not just free money.
Do I have the floor? Yeah. All right. I think that if you're going to try and capture voters to come out and vote, I think that you should start with the property taxes to realize, because that was an eye-opener to me, that you're getting less than my money than even though my taxes went up. I would start there, and I think that you have 30 seconds to grab their attention.
Okay.
I would start there. I would make a video and come vote. You had something else. The security. I would do that and the security for it, because that's really what's on people's mind. You get my attention on those two things, I'm going to turn out to vote. If I'm more interested, I can go to one of your seminars or wherever you're going to present these at. But if you're going to get my attention and I'm a busy voter, those two things, you keep putting that in my head and tell me what day to vote, I'll get there.
Yeah, and I think that your presentation is great. That was really good, and I think coming from a marketing perspective, which is the only perspective I have, is, if you have something that has all of that information, and then also have something that maybe appeals to someone else that needs kind of the big picture, I'd really like to see, myth, 825, and then the fact. I want to hear what are the myths and what is the fact. And I think that also, if you give a good mixture of big picture and then having some of the facts, so that everyone that takes in information differently is going to get something out of that.
So speaking of that, and I'm sure I'm over my time and I apologize. So some of the things that are still out there are critical race theory and gender fluidity and all that.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking myth and fact, do I go into that stuff? Because I can say it's not happening, but people don't believe me, right? You need to come and see our curriculum. We need to come see what our teachers are doing every day to really truly believe that we're not doing that. So do I get that far into the weeds, or do I just?
I don't think you get defensive about it. I think you wait,
Yeah,
you
you
be
be
prepared for
proactive.
those questions.
Sure.
But you wait for them to come, because there will be some knucklehead who will ask that question or will force you to address it. But I think you don't need to bring it up.
Okay.
I also believe in the in the carrot and stick theory. I think, you could say, well, if this levy doesn't pass, the first thing we'll cut is sports. That gets people's attention. You know.
I say
you know,
security, that'll get
And,
people's
yeah,
attention.
and we won't have the security that you want for your child.
Because that affects every student.
I think if people understand that your hands are tied without it, and you can't do the, you know, all of the things that you just discussed, and your hands will be tied,
Right.
I think that that's a compelling story.
And also that this isn't new, this isn't, I mean, obviously you're asking for a little bit more money, but this is, one's getting canceled, so we need to do it again.
Right.
You know, one's ran out, so.
Well, and we did the math, you know, the 5.958551 number represents the buying power of 4.955 million with it adjusted for inflation. So we really are not asking for, we're asking for the same buying power that we had in our last fundamental levy. And your taxes won't go up. I
Yeah.
mean, with the growth and all of this, I mean, our tax rate should stay the same. Your taxes should not increase as a result of the increase in the supplemental. So we probably need to make that more clear also.
That's the headline.
Absolutely, because that's what will
Yeah.
get people's attention.
Okay.
I think two other questions you need to be prepared for is, one, are you way behind on maintenance like Coeur d'Alene is?
Yes.
You know, and I know you don't want to throw bricks at anybody else, but I think you need to say, no, we're not, unless you are.
We are.
Okay, then you need to be honest about that, because that means you're gonna have to come back later for more. And then the other thing is, we understand we need a new high school. How are we gonna fund that?
Well, and that's bond. I mean, that's
Right.
a super majority that,
Yeah.
and our 55 million went out the window last year, so now we're looking at more like 75 million for, I mean, not Post Falls High School, but a high school that will hold 800 students. I mean,
Sure.
it's outrageous, the cost to build buildings right now. So, and we're not running an SPFL. I mean, I guess the other question before, I'm way over I'm so sorry about.
Don't worry.
Being longer.
We set the timeline.
So, Lakeland School District levy is 9.52 million per year, and they have approximately 4,600 students. Coeur d'Alene's is going, they're asking for 25 million per year in perpetuity, and they have 10,000 students. We're asking for 5.958551, and we have 6,100 students. While I don't want to necessarily throw my neighboring districts under the bus, I also think it's important, or I'm wondering, is it important to continually point out our fiscal responsibility, or should I just leave that alone?
I would leave that alone.
Okay?
Like you said, you don't want to throw anyone else, and you kind of want this to be a positive, you want to be proactive and not on the defense.
Okay?
I don't know, I would keep it, and I don't think you have to throw anyone under the bus. You have to say, they're asking for what they need and they're getting what they need. We aren't even asking enough.
Then why aren't we asking enough?
We
Right.
should,
Yes, yeah.
we should.
Well, and part of the reason we're
Well-
not asking for more is because exactly what you said, Len. We know we're gonna have to go to our voters for buildings. I mean, Coeur d'Alene is landlocked at this point. I mean, there,
Right.
you know, there's not a lot of opportunity for more kids to come into that district because they're surrounded. We're not.
Mhm.
When there are houses all over the prairie, they're coming to Post Falls or they're going to Lakeland. I mean, it's the two of us that have open space and places for people to move. And so we're trying to be respectful of the next ask, whenever that is.
I think you oughta, you also need to stress your involvement in K-Tech. I mean, Post Falls was basically instrumental in getting K-Tech created. And people understand the fact that we have a whole group of kids that are not gonna be college material, but they will absolutely have a great life if they become a plumber and a carpenter and an electrician. And that's what we offer in K-Tech, and that's what we offer our employers too. And how closely you're working with employers to meet their needs. Healthcare. I mean, you know, all the healthcare workers that I talk to, they have nothing but positive things to say about K-Tech. So I think stressing the importance of your continuing support and the fact that Post Falls was instrumental in getting K-Tech created
Okay.
is important to remind people.
And in the inflation, that we're suffering today has a huge headwind in getting all this stuff done, because there's so many hands in our pockets that, and more going out than we want to go out. That's a tough sell in any economy, but in this one, it's particularly hard.
Thank you so
You're
much
welcome.
for
Thank
your
you.
feedback. I appreciate it more than you know. And thank you for your time.
Well, one last thing.
Sure.
You know, I've heard or seen letters to the editor, particularly around the ask at Coeur d'Alene is well, you know, I don't have any kids in the district, you know. Well, somebody educated your kids. Somebody paid the taxes that sent your kids to school, and by God, you need to step up and do the same thing.
I don't think
Sorry, I
that
get
plays.
passionate.
Not only
That
that,
sounds like a letter from Len Crosby. Doesn't it?
I'll write it.
I don't think that plays well anymore.
You
I mean,
don't?
no, I don't think it, you know,
You
people
are-
are polarized.
you are an old
They're
fart.
here and they're here, and that's,
Yeah.
do you want them to go
How
to
do you
school, get an
change their
education,
mind?
and be successful to society, or do you want them to get in trouble? One way or the other, you're paying for it.
Right.
right.
Thank you, Dena, for what
Thank
you do.
you. I appreciate your time this morning.
All right. Good. All right. Next up on the agenda, we have unfinished business.
Commissioners, one of the items we have before us is an order of approval from Copper Basin Construction Incorporated. Welch Comer, our consulting engineers, have completed their review of the final submittal by Copper Basin Construction. This is for portions of Hope Avenue, Bogey Drive, and Killdeer Avenue in the Tullamore development. The closure date of the East Post Falls District in its entirety is December 31st of 2022. The total amount of documented costs for the submittal was $2,390,746.16. Based on our consulting engineer's review of the submittal, the amount that qualifies for reimbursement is $2,390,055.25, as specified in the order of approval. The current East Post Falls Tullamore fund balance, together with the projected 2022 tax increment yet to be received, totals approximately $1,896,000. Based on these calculations, the proponent developer will not be fully reimbursed for approved infrastructure project costs, and there will be no remaining fund balance in the East Post Falls Tullamore District at its termination. I would ask for a motion to approve the order of approval and authorize the vice chair to sign the document.
Move to approve the order of approval.
I second.
Roll call vote?
Yes.
Okay.
In discussion, I would remind the members of the commission, this was a failed development. The original proponent went bankrupt, the bank took it back, Copper Basin stepped in, they've done a fantastic job building it out, and as Joe said, we're not gonna fully reimburse them for the public improvement costs that they've had, but I think we owe them a debt of gratitude, both from the city and from the regional point, because we really have a tremendous development out there.
That's a good point.
Roll call. Clemenson,
Aye.
Crosby,
Aye.
Fleshman,
Aye.
Jeltness,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Coles.
Aye.
All right, great. Next on the agenda is new business.
The Pointe Partners Limited Liability Company has submitted a reimbursement request for infrastructure improvements made as part of the extensions of Baugh Way and Beck Road in the Center Point District. This district closes December 17th, 2022. The request for reimbursement with supporting documentation was received prior to the agreed-upon submission deadline of October 31st, 2022. The total request is for $2,100,933. I would ask for a motion to authorize the executive director to sign the task order document to initiate Welch Comer's review of the submittal.
I would move the approval of that. And just as a comment, All this does is have a third-party engineer review the cost and document it to them. We're not authorizing the payment of this. We're simply asking our engineer to take the information submitted and review it, and then come back to us with their recommendation. Correct?
That is correct. This task order simply initiates the review process with our consulting engineers, at which time they will provide, or after which they will provide a reimbursement recommendation.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote?
Jeltnes,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Clemenson,
Aye.
Crosby,
Aye.
Fleshman,
Aye.
Coles.
Aye.
All right, item B.
Yes. Wanted to receive a project update from Jerry Dicker with Beyond Green Incorporated in the Post Falls Technology District. Jerry contacted me this morning and wanted me to inform you that he apologizes he's not able to make it today. We're going to try and schedule that for the December meeting.
Thank you. How about staff report and updates?
Commissioners, on or before December 1st of each year, every urban renewal agency must provide administrative and financial information to a central registry maintained by the State Tax Commission. Post Falls Urban Renewal received the State Tax Commission's inquiry on Wednesday, November 16th, 2022, and submitted the necessary information back to the State Tax Commission the same day. Our auditor, Brian Scholl from Anderson Brothers, came in November 15th to do the field review and field work for the fiscal year 2022 audit. A draft is expected shortly, which will then be forwarded to the Finance Committee for review, after which I will then start drafting the MD&A. And lastly, I attended the Multi-Jurisdictional Regional Housing and Growth Issues Workshop on Thursday evening, November 10th. A significant amount of effort is being made to address our regional housing issues, particularly as those centered around workforce housing. I would strongly encourage all of you to go out to their website, www.rhgip.com, for additional information and to review their extensive FAQ, or frequently asked questions, offering. I don't know how many, they have the most extensive FAQ page I think I've ever seen. And it's what you, Christy, mentioned earlier as far as your suggestion to Dena with the school district includes myths or things of that nature. But there's a lot of questions, a lot of issues, a lot of, well, if they would just types of statements. And those frequently asked questions cover an immense amount of the spectrum. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Do we have any commissioner comments?
We're ahead of schedule on the audit, aren't we? It would seem to be.
Relative to prior years, yes.
Yes, good. Perfect. Thank you.
No other comments? Chairman comments? I have none at this time, so I guess we'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Meeting adjourned.